I'm just going to read through it briefly. But it's also something that's echoed in the works of the Apostle Peter. In 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 13 through 17, be subject for the sake of the Lord to every human institution, whether to a king as one in authority, or to governors as sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and the praise of those who do good. Of course, those are almost directly taken from the phraseology of our previous passages in the end of chapter 16, right? The appointment by the king of judges and officers, to use the terms of Deuteronomy, right? Who, in the case of Peter's wording, are sent to punish evildoers and praise the good. Praise meaning to reward, right? To honour the good, okay? Again, also presuming that they themselves, the king and his governors and officers and judges et al., are not the ones who determine what is good, but they are in subjection to the one who is the arbiter of good and evil. For such is the will of God, that by doing good you may silence the ignorance of foolish men, because your life will testify what is true and right and good. Operative wording that is given: act as free people. We love that phrase in the modern day, right? In an age and a zeitgeist of freedom and liberty. Act as free people and do not use your freedom as a covering for evil, but use it as slaves of God. In other words, those who are in subjection to God. Have freedom. Act as free people. Freed from what, of course, being the question? Freed from death. Freed from the curse of sin. Freed from the chains which bound our will, right? The bondage of the will, to use Martin Luther's phraseology. Free from darkness. Free from the powers that rule that. Act as free people and do not use your freedom as a covering for evil, but rather as servants of God. Because, of course, this kind of concept, and something which is very much worth explaining and opining, we live in a time, in a socio-cultural, political, ideological, etc., age in which freedom and liberty are the foundational pillars of our time. And the question, of course, deeply and directly coming from the concepts of liberalism, taken from that Latin term libertas, liberty, right, of the Enlightenment. And what is it that this liberal age has brought us? What is it that this liberty and freedom has now wrought us? Well, it has wrought us the liberty to slaughter our own children in the womb to the tunes of hundreds of millions of souls. It has wrought us all manner of vice and sin. It has brought about an utter epidemic of the mass addiction of the population to sexual perversion, to pornography, to homosexuality, to transgenderism, etc., etc. Right? It has brought us every manner of economic corruption we could almost imagine, and new ones are being imagined every other week. It has brought us utter subjection to mammon and to avarice and to greed. It has left no guardrails against any of these things. In our perpetual quest for freedom, we have never actually paused, in any meaningful sense at least, to ask ourselves what we are attempting to be freed from. And of course, as now I believe the result is so heavily and obviously and self-evidently in, the answer is that those who have promoted such freedom and liberty over the course of the last 300 years have instead been nefarious and diabolical actors promoting freedom from God. Freedom from God's law, freedom from God's commands, from his precepts, freedom from the divine order that governs the world, freedom from the very system that brought about the blessing and flourishing of our people, that brought about Christian civilization, particularly, albeit not exclusively, in Europe. It was freedom from that. The freedom of man to define himself, the freedom of man to believe whatever he so pleases, and to live however he so pleases within the confines of whatever is socially acceptable or he thinks he can get away with, whichever one comes first. This is what the age of freedom and liberty has become. Freedom and liberty have been turned into false gods, which we slavishly bow down at the altar of, and worship and venerate with every fibre of our being and with every avenue of our lives. In seeking freedom to live our own way, we have instead found nothing but enslavement of the most egregious and duplicitous kind. We are enslaved to gargantuan, globalistic political systems. We are enslaved to Leviathan-like corporations and financial systems. We are enslaved to every arbitrary wind of ideology and political leaning. We are enslaved to the utter corruption, duplicity, and sycophancy of political parties. We are enslaved to the never-ending rat race of our own vices of the heart. In seeking to become the freest and most liberty-bound of peoples, we have instead become the most detestable of slaves. Anyone who honestly observes the modern age and modern world in light of history will realize that to be true. And it is only those who are sleepwalking through their own slavery who have yet to alight upon that reality.